just to introduce myself, maybe Liz, all right, if we go ahead and begin with introductions. And
sure.
I know Princess is trying to help out getting everyone to speak, and you and I will keep doing what we can. Weird, it's telling me to send Pedro the pin again. I don't know what to do. So my name is Rigel Massaro, and I'm a staff attorney here at Public Advocate. Liz, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Liz Guillen. I'm the Director of Legislative and Community Affairs, and I'm in Public Advocate's Sacramento office.
Great. So we wanted to hear from you all. Oh, goodness. Why isn't my PowerPoint moving?
You're funny.
There we go. So we have a check-in question for those of you who are able to check in. We would love to hear your name, your organization, and how you imagine you might use what you learned today. And that kind of gives us a sense of your role in the community and helps us better on the fly tailor this webinar, which we really want to be a webinar that is immediately used in the work that we're all doing on the ground. So let's see. I know that Travis is on and able to speak. Travis, would you mind sharing?
Sure. Hi, my name is Travis Silva. I'm an attorney and fellow at the Lawyers Committee in San Francisco. And we don't have an organizer, so I'm also the organizer. And I am trying to support LCAP development in San Mateo County. And so, though I don't really have an organizing background, I'm trying to sort of break into that work at the community level, and I'm interested in just sort of the general presentation today for that purpose.
Great.
Thanks, Travis. So I think, well, we had Raina. Raina, are you there? All right. Is there anyone else that's able to check in with us verbally right now?
So Gabriel Medina says he's the policy manager at MEDASF, but he can't chat. He can't speak. I'm sorry, what is MEDASF?
Mission Economic Development Agency, I believe. I met with, there we go, yeah, they are doing awesome work in San Francisco.
Oh, excellent. Looking
for participation for English learning and low-income students.
Excellent.
If anyone else wants to chat to us like Gabriel did, I can see we've got Betty Cao with Chinese for Affirmative Action here in San Francisco. We've got Claudia Corchado with United Way Merced. We've got Miranda Mark with Parents for Public Schools here in San Francisco. We've got Olga with the Campaign for College Opportunity. Pedro Hernandez with our office here at Public Advocates. Reina Villalobos with, oh man, Reina, I forget the whole piece, but Liz probably knows your acronym.
Yeah, it's the Central California Regional Obesity Prevention Program, or CROP.
Thank you. We've got Stephanie Gomez with Families in Schools, and Travis introduced himself with the Lawyers Committee. So there, I did your introductions for you. I'm sure you will all be using this. Let's see. Let's move on. Oh boy. This is really unfortunate. There we go. Okay. It just takes me a while to move from my slides. I think my computer is totally overworked right now. So we have 4 objectives for today. We want to review the wins, and by wins we really mean the wins supported by parent and student groups across the state. The wins that we have in the final local control funding formula regulations and the local control accountability plan template. Side note, this webinar is for folks who already have a good sense of what local control funding formula is, how it works, and what the LCAP process and LCAP template basically look like from last year. If that's not you, feel free to stick with us and you some materials afterward to kind of give you more of the baseline information you would need to really understand what we're going to be talking about today.
And not only that, we'd be happy to walk you through it ourselves. So don't feel like this is your one and only chance. We really want you to get a grasp of it.
Yeah, and to get any of that support, feel free to just email Princess, who is the person you got the invite for this webinar from, or you can chat us and we will be able to follow up with you. We also want to review the LCAP development briefly from last year, kind of what were the pitfalls and how does that impact what we are doing this year with the annual update. The third thing we want to do is get to know the new LCAP template and see it as a strong organizing tool for stakeholder engagement, fiscal accountability, and actual change for students, especially high-needs students. And then the last thing we want to do is kind of review the annual update timeline, review process, and some of the big takeaways that you want to have as you enter the update process in your district. So let's start off with reviewing some of the regulatory and template wins. The first big one is that districts need to consult with pupils. Previously, it had only been required that they engage, and that's a much weaker word. That they must have now a process for getting input from students. And we know that Californians for Justice and Youth Together fought really hard for this language, and we know that they and hope that other groups across the state are going to leverage this to get meaningful input from students. Parents must now be a majority on any district parent advisory committee or district English learner advisory committee. There's much better academic accountability. Districts must be much more clear about which students and schools will benefit from expenditures. So hopefully we'll see fewer actions and services that are just supposed to benefit everyone everywhere. There should be more specificity in this year's LCAP. Where supplemental and concentration funds are used for school-wide or district-wide expenditures, which are expenditures that by definition would also benefit regular students that are not unduplicated, then those funds must be principally directed towards and effective in meeting the goals for high-needs students. So that you can't just willy-nilly spend supplemental and concentration funds on a school-wide or district-wide basis. High-needs students need to be at the forefront of the district's intention when they spend those funds. And then finally, we have a better LCAP template. It's easier to understand, which improves the community's ability to make the district accountable for its actions, expenditures, and ultimately results. Feel free to input any questions you have into the chat box about as we're going along. I know a lot of folks can't contribute, just looking to see if there are any questions. Seems like not, so we're going to go ahead and...
We have a poll question anyway.
Yeah. So I think, Princess, are you doing the... Can you input the poll question? Oh, sorry, there's one more piece. There is now a standardized formula to calculate supplemental and concentration funds. So that last year, it was, and this is very complicated, we will get into it, but not on today's webinar. But last year, districts were given leeway in terms of how they calculated how much of their LCFF funds were needed to be destined for high-needs students. And so, Public Advocates has actually been on the ground in a couple districts trying to ensure that districts are properly calculating how much supplemental and concentration funds they need to spend on high-needs students. A big win in this template, in the regs, is that now all districts will be calculating it in the same way. Okay, so Princess, if you could launch the first poll question. That would be great. Okay, I'm poll in progress for attendees only. So folks should see a poll which asks, which of the wins do you want to leverage in your organizing this year? And please check as many of these as are applicable to you. Are you going to be integrating student voice into the LCAP process? Are you going to be increasing parent membership on committees? Are you going to push for clarity about which schools and which students are going to benefit from local control funding formula funds? Or are you going to be ensuring that school-wide or district-wide spending is principally directed towards high-need students? So we're going to give you another minute to complete that poll.
Yes. Yeah. %60
have voted, and so just give me like another minute, see if we can get everyone to vote. Okay, Princess, we'll go ahead and close down that poll.
So it looks like most people
got
want to ensure
folks
spending.
responded that the majority of people saying they're going to be ensuring that that spending is principally directed. Wait a minute. Directed toward high-need students, which is fabulous. Then the next highest response, 56%, said that they're going to be increasing parent membership on committees. Nearly half of our attendees are going to be integrating student voice. And then the minority is going to be looking at clarity about which schools and students are going to be benefiting from LCFF funds. So thanks so much, folks. I'm going to go ahead and close that poll. Looks like Princess did. Thank you, Princess. And thank you, everyone, for your patience as I navigate GoToWebinar, which is not my forte. So Liz, I'm going to pass it over to you now to talk about LCAP development, what it's supposed to look like, kind of what it looked like last year, and then introduce us. Then I guess I'll take it back to talk about the new template.
All right, folks. So this diagram on slide 5 is taken from a report that was made to the state legislature, and it was just released, and it was done by the Legislative Analyst's Office, or the LAO. Now, the LAO is an agency that is charged with advising the legislature, and it's supposed to be a bipartisan agency, and basically to give legislators sort of, but here are some facts, and here are some pros and cons, and this is what we're seeing. Well, they decided to study 50 different LCAPs around the state. And in their report, showing what they found, they decided to lay out the vision for LCAP development. And this seemed like a really good way to help us think about the LCAP as part of this new state school accountability system. It's really about continually planning and evaluating for improvement. So if you start at the top, the district is going through an LCAP process. They're making plans or they're updating them. And then they go through the process of getting comments and feedback, and then they adopt it. And then the county approves it. That would be happening towards the end of the school year and in the summer. And then the next year, the district will be implementing the LCAP. And then at some point, the counties are going to be looking at how the districts are doing. Now, how they look at the district's performance will be done with a tool called the evaluation rubrics. And we're going to talk later about the development of that because, believe it or not, it's not developed yet. And then based on the rubric and what it looks like districts need help with, the County Office of Ed will provide support if needed. That's the COE support. So this is what the new school improvement system, how it's envisioned by the change of local control funding formula. So it wasn't just a change in how the state sends money to schools, but also in how the state will hold schools accountable. Now, when the LAO, you can go to the next slide, Rigel. When the LAO looked at these 50 LCAPs, it made findings, and one of the findings was a little troubling. The other findings are well, all of the findings that the LAO made really mirror and reflect your experiences on the ground. And that's why I think it's important to review them, because if you can feel confident that, okay, the legislature and other policymakers in Sacramento are hearing the same problems that you're having. So you should feel comfortable at the local level expressing your concern about them. So the LAO's first recommendation was that districts ought to be allowed to emphasize a clear strategic plan as opposed to a detailed comprehensive plan. Now, that's problematic for us because from the beginning, the law, and the law still states this, that the LCAPs are supposed to be a comprehensive plan. In other words, they are supposed to contain the plans for the use of all LCFF funds, which are state money, and the way they are supposed to do it is by using these 8 state priorities. The LAO basically says, well, that's too hard. We think that it's still too early to say that, and that, you know, education is a complex process. There's a reason there's 8 state priorities. So we hope that you will continue pushing for the districts in your area to be focused on all the state priorities. In line with that, this same concern, the LAO says, well, we should just allow districts to focus on a few key metrics. And we don't agree with that. We think that, again, all the 8 state priorities and the metrics that are laid out in the statute about how to measure those priorities, we think they're really important. Now, keep in mind, there aren't metrics for some of those priorities, like parental engagement. Parental involvement only has 2 metrics. The metric of how parents are involved in decision-making at the school and the district level, and how parents are involved in the programs for their students, high-need parents. Well, how's the district going to measure that? That's a metric, and that isn't really laid out in the statute. So it's not to our benefit if the districts are being let off the hook for identifying or focusing just on a few metrics. We want them to focus on all of them at this point. Now, this third finding is something that we know all of you experienced. So the LAO says that the districts need to clarify metrics so that we can monitor performance. What the LAO found is that, you know, districts didn't say, you know, districts said, okay, we're going to have 90% English learners reclassified, and next year we're going to have 90, or the year after that we're going to have 91, and the year after that 92%. Well, it wasn't even clear what, you know, where you were starting from or why 90% was a good place to start. In keeping with that, the LAO also found, very much like we all found on the ground, that school districts in their LCAPs never said whether or not the actions that were in the LCAP are new actions or whether or not they are things that they were already doing. So it's hard to evaluate whether a plan is going to be useful if you don't know if the actions are something they're going to try anew, or if they're just going to keep doing the same thing they've always been doing. So the information regarding low-income students and English learners, we all found, and the LAO confirmed also in their review of LCAPs, is that the district didn't have very good information about about their own English learner students and their own low-income students. And they didn't provide very good information to folks on the ground when they made plans for them. So this is about assessing needs. It's hard to identify what students need if you don't show where they are to start, and if you don't share the same information with everybody about how you're making that decision.
I'm trying to pull up the next one. There we go.
So effective strategic plans. Again, that's a strategic plan versus a comprehensive plan. The LAO says that districts need more information, or they need sort of best practices or examples to follow on what they should include in their LCAPs. We think at this point that parents and students and community members on the ground ought to be helping districts identify the information that they want and need. Now, there may be folks who don't know, We are not all education policy experts. So, for example, what is the information that shows whether English learners are learning English and are getting access to core curriculum? The state has set out certain assessments like the CELT, which is an assessment that is given at the beginning of the year to identify how students are performing on English. But that's not quite the same as how they're performing in other subjects. And so when you set a goal for getting more students, English learners, reclassified, that's slightly different than a goal for ensuring that more English learners are accessing A to G courses. Now, it happens that in most districts, one has to be reclassified before one can even access the A to G courses, and that's unfortunate. So that's why one is very important, but the other is too.
Liz, can I just add that for me, from an organizing standpoint, there are a couple big takeaways from these recommendations. One is that we saw so many districts did not meet the standard of using metrics. So where you see that your district did not provide a way to measure their progress, this supports you, because this is something the LAO is really saying that needs to happen. There need to be metrics required of districts. And whether actions are new and ongoing is another organizing tool. To me, be ready for districts to say, oh, well, we're trying to be more strategic rather than comprehensive. And I think you can counter that approach by saying that, yeah, we think that whatever we're asking for is a strategic ask. It is based on a need that needs to be prioritized. So just being aware that these are kind of some recommendations out there to the legislature that smart districts may try to leverage, and that smart organizers should also leverage. So now we wanted to step away from this PowerPoint and actually get out an LCAP and show you what it looks like this year, and kind of big areas to what do you want to leverage most in the LCAP. This isn't completely comprehensive. What we're going to do, we are, as I said, planning another webinar to get into the pieces around proportionality and how to calculate funds that should be justified to high-need students. But we hope that you'll, after this, feel relatively familiar with the LCAP, the new LCAP template, such that you can use it and leverage it, especially as guiding questions. So I'm going to minimize this for a moment and get us into the LCAP template. Hopefully everyone can see this.
If you can't see it, I hope you'll send us a note.
So we had also sent around a copy of the LCAP template. Princess sent it in yesterday's email. So if you happened to have printed it, we do recommend that you get it out right now in a pen or a highlighter and make some marks on it to help you digest what we're talking about, because this isn't the most, we thought this was the best way to present the information, but it's still not the most, I think, user-friendly. So I just wanted to highlight, we're on page 1, and this is just the basic, this is what this is all about. This is the school district, and for each school, we need to have the goals and specific actions to achieve those goals for all students and each subgroup of students. And we know that's foster youth, low-income students, and English learners, including students with disabilities, for each of the state priorities and any local priorities. So it's a huge mouthful, but that little paragraph really succinctly describes what this document is about. We also want to highlight that, contrary to what the Legislative Analyst's Office is suggesting, this is a comprehensive planning tool. So that means that the LCAP should have expense, all LCFF funds should be accounted for in the LCAP, not just supplemental and concentration funds. So this is an area where we at Public Advocates saw a lot of districts limited last year the funds they reported in the LCAP to just the supplemental and concentration funds. So you didn't see any base grant funds, and base grant funds going to, for example, teacher salaries and retirement and facilities and all the different pieces that are not supplemental and concentration expenditures. So this is an area where you really can push your district to include all basic funds. Let's go to page 2. Page 2 and 3 are the state priorities that really should drive LCAP development. And what I think we saw a lot of last year was districts saying, well, let's take our educational program and plug it into this LCAP template thing. And that should not be what happens. We should be looking at these state priorities and figuring out from the district's perspective, how are we going to move students, especially high-need students, along each of these, and all of our schools along each of these priority areas, and then any local priority areas that are chosen by the district and the community. So the state priorities, which folks are probably well familiar with, are broken up into 3 groups: conditions of learning, including the basic necessities, implementation of state standards, course access, and then for county offices, expelled students and foster youth. The second big bucket that they have here is pupil outcomes, and that's pupil achievement, and then other pupil outcomes, which is subject areas not specifically assessed by the standardized test. And then the final bucket is engagement, parent engagement, student engagement, and school climate. Again, we could take a lot of time and go into depth on each one of these. We're not going to do that here today. I want to talk briefly about Section 1. So Section 1 is largely the same as it was last year, but I want to highlight some things that are the same and some things that are different. So we think that the guiding questions under Section 1 are really powerful for advocacy tools, and want to just go over these. So the first question, this is a little different from last year because it really outlines all the different kinds of stakeholders that the district has, that the district should be consulting and engaging with. The second question highlights that stakeholders need to be engaged in a timely manner, and that means now and yesterday, not in February, not in March. I mean, of course in those months, but beginning right away, because LCAP, the district is thinking about its LCAP most assuredly right now. It highlights that stakeholders need information so that they are able to contribute and inform the LCAP goal-setting process. And so that's not just the district's presentation of the LCAP, but what is all the qualitative and quantitative data and metrics the district provided to parents and students and all the other stakeholders so they could be informed decision makers. It asks about the changes that were made to the LCAP as a result of the feedback. So this is implying and saying directly that that districts need to consider and make changes to their draft based on stakeholder feedback. The fifth question is really around engaging the representatives of parents and guardians. I'm sorry, blanked. I'm having a little brain fart on that one. Section 6 is new, and this is about the consultation of students. So this is brand new section, and this is something that districts need to do this year that they did not have to do in the same way last year. And then finally, question 7 addresses how stakeholder improvement has been continued and supported. So not just at the bare minimum, perhaps, that they did last year, but really moving and improving stakeholder involvement every year. And this chart here is the same as last year, having the involvement process laid out, and you, as a district, to input a narrative here, the impact on the LCAP, and then how the involvement process changed in its update year, and how the impact on the LCAP changed in the update year as a result of the involvement process.
Now, in terms of what goes in those boxes, as organizers, you should feel comfortable asking the questions that are laid out here in the guiding questions. The state has told districts through these questions in the template that here are some things you should consider. So, for example, on number 3, this is an area where we get a lot of questions. What information was made available related to the priorities and used by the district? And how was it made available? A lot of parent organizers are complaining that the information is too complicated and people don't understand it. Do folks need, a little time? Do folks need a workshop just on understanding, what are the issues that our low-income students are facing? How are they different from the rest of the student population? You should feel comfortable asking for that information if you feel it's necessary to make a better plan. I wonder if we have any questions at this point that people either want to voice or chat on.
Good thinking. I'm looking at the chat, and I know that a few people are able to speak, so please do share with us any questions you have, and we'll keep an eye on that chat. I'll go ahead and start into section 2 if that's all right, Liz.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So last year, you remember we had section 2, which was really goals and actions that the district was going to take, and then there was a section 3 that described the expenditures. So a big improvement this year, which is a direct result of your advocacy, is that these sections are together. And before you see the actual template, there are some really helpful definitions here that you'll see used in the template, and also there are guiding questions. And so these guiding questions are very similar to last year, but there are some improvements in addition. So the first 3 questions really highlight that, again, the state priorities need to guide LCAP development. So again, what are the goals that are going to address the conditions of learning priorities? What are the goals that are going to address the pupil outcomes priorities? And what are the goals that are going to address the parent and student engagement priorities? Are there any locally identified priorities? In the LCAPs that I reviewed, they didn't locally identified priorities in addition to the state priorities. But that's an area where, of course, you can push your district to have a locally identified priority. This is a huge part that you heard Liz talk about with the LAO. Have the unique needs of individual school sites been evaluated? So really having a baseline needs assessment so that we know the goals are actually meeting a concrete need at the school site level. And then not only unique goals for school sites, but for unduplicated students, foster youth, low-income students, English learners. And then again, around metrics, we need specific, expected, measurable outcomes. And this is an area where many districts fell short. In fact, in all of these, many districts fell short. But we want to highlight these guiding questions because these are really powerful organizing tools. And then again, in terms of the information available to stakeholders, what information was considered at the school site level and what information was considered for the subgroups. So we want to make sure that it's clear how English learners, foster youth, low-income students are performing so that we know that our goals and actions are aligned to meet the current level of performance. And then which actions are going to be provided to all students, which will be provided to subgroups, and so that it's not just the districts aren't just focusing on all students as we saw in many LCAPs last year. And then how do the actions and services link to identified goals and expected measurable outcomes? To me, that's sort of what all this is about. That all needs to come together to meet the needs of kids now. So a final question, which expenditures support changes as a result of the goal identified? So you want to be able to align expenditures that are supporting actions and services to the budget document. That's probably another topic for another webinar. Aligning the budget to the LCAP is a big task. But as I said, this should be a comprehensive planning document that that you're able to look at on its own and understand how LCFF funds are being spent. So this is what Section 2 looks like now. And it's really, it is, as you can see, a huge improvement because you have any given goal, it needs to be linked to a need, and then you need to see if it applies to which schools is applied to and which student subgroups does it apply to. You need to check up here which state priorities it applies to or local priorities. And then here we need the measurable annual outcomes. And then instead of having the actions and services in one section and the expenditures in another, these are aligned. So this is very helpful. It's much easier to analyze how much money is going to a specific action, how it will be measured, and who it's going to benefit, all on one page. And all this is for every goal. So you can imagine, or I'm imagining, that the LCAP will not get any shorter or any sweeter this year. It's going to be long because this is just for LCAP year 1. Then you can see they need to do this for next year and the year after. Okay? So this is
but know that most LCAPs, and I think most districts, and I would encourage us to mostly focus on year 1 because that's the next year. And that's, those plans ought to be based on, you know, what the review was this year during your process. Also keep in mind that a goal, there doesn't have to be a goal in every district for every priority. Districts are allowed to have one goal that meets more than one priority, and that's probably a good thing. Obviously, a district with fewer goals has fewer pages in the LCAP, and I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily, but I do think it's important that, and it's going to be easier to show whether or not a goal addresses specific priorities.
Thanks, Liz. So this is Section 2, and I wanted to, there's one more, and then there's this annual update piece of Section 2, and this is new. So this is important. It also has its guiding questions, which are important. Basically, did the actions and services address the needs of all students that you said would address the needs of all students last year? And did the actions and services addressing all the subgroups meet their needs? And did they result in the desired outcomes? So we have 1 year to work with now.
Can I just add here? See on that question it says how the action services address the needs of all subgroups identified per this Ed Code section. That Ed Code section isn't just low-income foster youth and English learner. That Ed Code section lists all the subgroups that we all care about. All the race and ethnic subgroups are included in that. So one of the things that we're hearing is that districts now appear to be getting permission to step away from any work targeting, for example, black male students or Native American students, immigrant students, refugee students. There are still subgroups that they're supposed to be accountable to, separate from the 3 high needs groups that the formula is providing more money on. Okay?
Thanks, Liz. And Angelica's chiming in here that she would also look to year 2 because that's what's coming up. So just, keeping in mind that these years are they're gonna feel like they're moving really quickly, and we don't just want to look to the next year. We want to have, to the extent we can think about gains that are going to need 2 years, for example, or even 3, having the long view is also helpful. I hope I captured that comment, Angelica, who is unable to speak, I take it. So continuing with the guiding questions for the annual update. Have the actions and services addressed the needs and goals of specific school sites? So we went from all students to student subgroups, which Liz helpfully pointed out is more than just the high needs students identified with LCFS. And now we're looking at specific school sites. What information was used to decide to review progress? And let's see, sorry, again, this one toward the goal and expected measurable outcomes. So to me, this is reiterating and adding to the questions above. The goals and specific actions and measurable outcomes we should be seeing progress year to year, and that question is getting to that issue. And what differences were there between budgeted expenditures and estimated actual annual expenditures? So that is to say, what's the difference between what you said you'd spend and what you think you've spent this year? Obviously, this year isn't over with, so I think that's why they're saying estimated actuals. But there may be discrepancies if they said they'd be spending $100,000 on a restorative justice program, and so far this year we only see that there's been a $20,000 expenditure. Why is that? So then there's a form to be filled out with the annual update, and this is to essentially compare all of the pieces that we just discussed in the guiding questions. So we have the original goal and where this goal applies to. What were the expected outcomes? What were the actual outcomes? And then what were the planned services? And what were the actual services? So this is a real good comparison. What was the scope of service, the planned scope of service, and the actual scope of service? And then what changes need to be made as a result of reviewing the progress to make sure that we're going to get to the goals that we articulated? So that's a summary. Liz, do you have anything to add to the annual update template here?
I want to, nothing really to add, but except that I think it's helpful to look at the 2 templates side by side so that you can know the differences. Otherwise, it gets a little confusing. There is a question from Susan whether districts are required to report on each school site, their needs and goals. And the answer is no, they're not required to. But the statute says they are supposed to when they are different. And I think it's up to community organizers to lift that up for the district. So for example, if you are in a district where you have some really high-performing schools and some that are lower performing, there's no way that the district should be having the same goals for all students in all schools. And it makes sense to ask, how are you differentiating, and especially how are you increasing or improving services for low-income students, foster youth, and English learners, since it's likely that the lower performing schools have those students. Now, the statute says that they're supposed to report for each district and each school site, but we sort of lost that fight at the State Board of Ed in the regulations process.
Thanks, Liz. Okay.
And
so
I should say the reason we lost it is mostly because just of the daunting task, right? I mean, you see these huge, long LCAPs just for a district. Imagine what they would look like if all schools were identified. Even so, I do think that organizers and community advocates can push for. And it looks like Angelica is adding in the experience that some districts did provide an appendix to the end of their LCAPs. And in some districts, we know that they sent supplemental and concentration dollars directly to school sites. So I think there's a really strong argument. Angelica points out that in that situation, there's a strong argument to ask, what are the goals and actions for those specific school sites in the use of those funds. Okay, some districts. I hope folks can see the comments here that Angelica is making. You can?
Well, I just saw that, I'm not sure. It depends on whether the people submitting comments submit them to organizers, presenters, or to everyone. So, Angelica, if you're able to, you may not be able to give them to everyone.
I'm making you a presenter, Angelica.
That's fine.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure that they can still see my screen. Okay, great. Hopefully everyone can. Anything more here, Liz?
No, not for me. I do want questions, though, if folks have them, to please continue, because these are really good questions.
I don't see any now. We will keep an eye out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I just wanted to mention Section 3 because it is very important, but it requires its own webinar to really do it justice. But you can see here that they're asking districts to identify the amount of funds calculated on the basis of the number of low-income, foster youth, and English learner students. And so this is, as a result of your advocacy, this is a win because this regulation specifies how that calculation is to be done, and it's no longer up to districts to do it sort of on their own, according to their own format. For us to go into that, we're gonna take a different webinar time. But this is an important section because it also is asking the district to describe how they are spending supplemental and concentration funds this year. So for the district that is just checking scope of services all and all for everything, they are going to have to include a description of and justification for the use of their supplemental funds in any kind of a district-wide, school-wide, county-wide, or charter-wide manner and how they're using them. So going back to the win that I discussed earlier, if they are using supplemental and concentration funds in any of these district-wide, school-wide manners, they're going to have to describe how the expenditure is principally directed towards and effective in meeting the needs of high-need students. So that's what they're going to do in these boxes here. And It's very important, and we don't have time to really get into the calculation here, or even the piece about district and school-wide. And then the end here is an appendix describing how to calculate and report all these different rates and data and metrics. So that's the template. Are there any questions right now? I'm not seeing any. We are going to keep working with the template with an example right now. Feel free to keep sending in any questions you have. So I just want to share with you a real live LCAP goal for Oakland Unified for 2014-15. So first year of LCAP, Oakland Unified was, this was their goal for facilities. So as we know, priority 1 is basic necessities priority, and that's, that comes from the Williams lawsuit and settlement that public advocates helped to bring and settle to ensure that all students in California have access to 3 things. One is a qualified teacher. The second is textbooks and materials needed to reach the curriculum. And the third is safe facilities that are in good repair. So I wanted to highlight this because this is a really important. We hear all the time from students and parents how school facilities aren't up to snuff, how they're sharing books, and how the PE teacher is teaching a math class. And so we know that basic necessities are still a huge issue for California students, and we wanted to highlight that priority in this webinar. And within that priority, I'm highlighting the facilities piece. So this is what Oakland Unified said last year they were going to do for facilities. And I'm sorry, I meant to have the part here that's up here. This is all the actual template. Sorry, this is the, oopsie. I don't know why the bold didn't come through for me. This is the template, and below the part that I did not highlight is what OUSD said they would do. So they said their identified need and metric was that an important condition for student learning is a school building on campus that is safe, clean, and in good repair. That's what they're saying a need is. To me, that's not a need. A need would be saying that we have a certain number of school buildings or facilities issues in the district. So I don't think they met the need piece. For measuring progress, they have here the School Accountability Report Card reports, which are a metric, but they didn't articulate a goal for that metric. They have here maintain school facilities in safe, clean, and good repair. Well, they didn't say how many should be labeled exemplary or good by the SARC, but so this is all very vague. There's no identified need, a pretty loose metric. They said that the applicable subgroups are all students and all schools. Well, that's hard to believe. I'm sure there are some schools in OUSD that have great facilities, and some schools that need much more help to get their facilities up to snuff. They left the annual update portion blank, which makes sense because this was year 1. But they didn't fill in anything to describe how they're going to measure progress, year 1, year 2, or year 3. So this goal is essentially unenforceable by either the district or the community because they have not set any goals to any measurable outcomes, any measurable progress to hold the district to. And I'll just tell you that in section 3 last year, where they should have identified an expenditure aligned to this goal, OUSD did not do that. There's no expenditure that is targeted toward facilities being in safe, clean, and in good repair. So this is a big problem as OUSD enters year 2, right? So I want to share with you what this information might look like in the annual update form. So I'm going to pull that up right now, and this is my doing. This is OUSD had no role in this annual update piece. So I put OUSD's information into the annual update template. So we did have a goal, right, that school facilities would be safe, clean, and in good repair. But remember, they didn't say which schools. They just said all. I guess I should put all here. Oops. I guess I can't input because I already made it a PDF. Sorry, folks. So it should say all there. And applicable pupil subgroups is all. They didn't really have a measurable annual outcome. They said that they would use the SARC, but they didn't say how they would measure it. And we certainly don't have, I'm not sure how they're measuring, if they didn't say how many schools are going to be exemplary or exemplary facilities or good facilities, then we can't really measure where we are, what progress we've made. And as you recall, they didn't have any actions or services, and they didn't have any expenditures. So there's a lot missing for this goal that was present in last year's LCAP. I'm not sure what actions or services they actually took. They may have taken some, and they actually may have spent something, but it's unclear what was spent. I just added, and this is me making this up, that perhaps this year their LCAP will contain actions and expenditures for this goal so that they can assess progress moving forward. And then I wanted to share with you what this might look like, what progress might look like. So this is, I just scrolled up to section 2 with the goal, the identified need. This is not the annual update form. This is just the regular goal form. So we have the goal that school facilities be safe, clean, and in good repair. And then I just made some stuff up. This is definitely not applicable to OUSD. This is me totally making things up for a district that does not exist. So a potential identified need might be that 15% of the schools are reported on the SARC as having facilities that are either fair or poor. And so they want to remedy that need. And so the schools not yet rated good or exemplary would be the schools that we're targeting. And I made up schools Alpha, Beta, and Epsilon. So those 3 schools are rated either fair or poor, and we want to get them up to good or exemplary. And the applicable pupil subgroups, I would agree that it's all, because we wouldn't just target certain students within a school, but we will note in my made-up district that these schools that are ranking low are over 75% high-need students, and they're particularly low-income students. So, and I made up a measurable outcome that in year 1, schools ranked poor will be ranked fair, and schools that are ranked fair will be ranked good. And we know that's for 3 schools. And then I made up some actions and services. That, for example, we want to replace the HVAC system at Alpha School, and that's going to cost $10,000. We're going to remodel the bathrooms in the Beta School, and that's going to be $13,000. We're going to replace a leaky roof in the multi-purpose room, and that will be $9,000. So you can see that this is hopefully getting much more specific than OUSD did last year. And then I won't spend time on it, but I went ahead and added what a goal for year 2 might be with some specific actions and expenditures, and what a goal for year 3 might be. And for me, I was, there were fewer actions because I was imagining the district making progress and eventually getting to their goal that all school facilities will either be ranked good or exemplary. I realize, folks, that this example I've provided this is a very basic goal. There are many more goals that are much more complex. But for the sake of this webinar, I just wanted to show how last year's LCAP template, which looked like this, might transfer into this year's LCAP template, and what information you might see missing that they will need to add. Anything to add to that, Liz? I'm seeing there's a, thank you. Angelica's highlighting that SARC is School Accountability Report Card, which I mentioned in OUSD's LCAP from last year. Any other questions right now? I'm not seeing any. So with that,
I will just add to Angelica's comment about the SARC that the SARC is some baseline information that you should feel comfortable using. It doesn't have all the information that you need, but it could be helpful to you when you go to that first LCAP session or to a school site council meeting to say, this is the information that was reported about what the conditions are like at the school. So on the SARC, there's a section around facilities. There's also a section around teachers that are misassigned, whether or not teachers have the right credential to teach a specific class, or whether or not they have the training to teach English learners. Then there's also test scores. But know that because the state has sort of taken a test score holiday, there isn't reporting on test scores for the last year. But that really shouldn't stop you from using prior year test scores. I mean, things don't change that much. You ought to be able to know in a school, based on their school accountability report card, which students are doing the best and which ones are struggling the most.
Hey, hello, this is Angelica. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I just wanted to chime in. Hi, everyone. I'm also on staff with Public Advocates. Just to say that I thought, Rigel, your example really beautifully showed how the new template is going to really reveal the gaps in last year's LCAP, where, you know, a district might have set up a goal but then had no actions and services to back it up. And I'm sure some of the groups on here might care about things like, you know, school climate and having, for example, restorative justice, or having concrete actions for English learners. And this will make it easier to identify where those gaps are, but I would not say that districts are automatically going to do the kind of fleshing out that Rigel did here, you know, with the red writing. I think that this is a real area for community to be in conversations with the district around, you know, are you going to make revisions, or what are you going to do to update your LCAP to make sure that you do have actions and services for certain goals? I think that there will need to be a push, because I think many districts are going to try to just try to translate, make it fit whatever last year's LCAP was into the new template, even if there end up being blanks.
Thanks, Angelica. That's really important. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, you're going to have to push folks to get this level of input, is what we think. So with that, I'm going to return to our PowerPoint. Let's see. So there's some big takeaways here that we want folks to remember. There's so much information in the LCAP template that we just went over, but some things to really focus on. The LCAP template must be completed each year for the next 3 years. So this year's LCAP template will be for 15-16, 16-17, and 17-18. This must include progress made last year. Again, Section 1 is describing community consultation and how it contributed to the update, and Section 2 addresses goals, metrics, and expenditures. Every goal should be aligned to a state priority. So this was Liz shared an image from the Legislative Analyst Office report before, and we wanted to share this one. This was really, to us, was really helpful to just kind of get a sense of an illustration for how all these different pieces are supposed to work together. So you've got your priority areas, and they should inform your goals. Goals and priority areas should be aligned. Those go down to the actions that are going to help meet the goal, and then metrics to measure whether the actions are meeting the goal, and then the targets for each of the 3 years. So there's an example here of ensuring all students are prepared for college or career upon graduation, and how you need to offer additional science courses to ensure that students meet university prerequisites. So we want to have a metric being performance on the 10th grade science standardized test and the number of new science teachers they hire. And so we want to see progress every year on both of those metrics. Okay. So, Liz, would you like to quickly go over this timeline with folks? Sorry, we had some issues putting this format into the PowerPoint, so it's a little wonky, but This is what district engagement we think should look like. And so we're interested in, kind of hearing from you. The next slide is going to be a poll question about where your district is at with engagement. Liz, would you like to go over some of the high-level takeaways here?
Sure. Mostly the big takeaway is that this is just a suggested timeline. Chances are you're in a district that hasn't done a lot of this stuff, or they're just starting. But from our perspective, the LCAP update is something that should be happening all year long, and all the different input processes that even existed before LCFF, like school site council and DLAC and DAC, those things should be happening as a way to contribute to the LCAP. So we are suggesting that they ought to form their parent advisory committees. These are the minimum committees required, that they should be doing that in the fall, that they should, set up a calendar so that everybody knows what the district's planning on doing, and that they continue to engage the parent committees and the community and begin revising their LCAP, because they're revising their budget. And the budget revision is something that they've always been doing, even before LCFF. So there is a timeline for budget revisions that already existed. We hope that districts will be releasing a draft of their updated LCAP in the spring, and they should start their public hearings in May and June, because they're supposed to adopt their LCAP and their budget at the same meeting before June 30. Then the county gets involved by reviewing the LCAP and asking the district to make any changes if it has questions. So those are the big takeaways for this. We're going to also make this available in a handout, since it's not as friendly in a PowerPoint slide.
So some pieces on improving community engagement, and these will all sound familiar, so we'll go through them quickly. They're listed essentially directly from the guiding questions, but we want to especially focus on these in the takeaways so that folks feel like these are some really key ways to push your district. How is stakeholder involvement being continued and supported in the district? Are stakeholders being included in a timely manner? A lot of districts are really working on LCAPs right now, and so hopefully the community is also at the table right now or very soon. What information does the community have access to be able to help in the goal-setting process? And how are students being consulted? So again, these are questions we reviewed in the guiding questions. We just wanted to highlight them again. And then I think we'd like to launch the poll question, Princess, which I think I can do too, but if you're doing it, let's see. Poll question is launched, so go ahead and let us know what's true in your district. Do you have a plan for stakeholder input? Was your stakeholder input plan created with stakeholders? Again, you can check as many of these as you want. Have stakeholders already begun to contribute to the annual update process? Do stakeholders receive training from your district? And does your district provide information for stakeholders to make informed decisions? So we'll give you another minute to finish with that poll. Maybe one more minute. Looks like we've got half of you have voted. Votes are coming in. I know it's a long poll, a lot of reading. So I'm not going to close the poll quite yet because I know there's a few more folks that need to vote, but just to share, it seems like 2/3 of the people on the call do have a plan. That's good. And a third say that the plan was made with stakeholder input. And half say that stakeholders have already begun to contribute to the template process. That's great. No one says that their district is providing the information that they need to help make them informed decisions. So that's unfortunate. And we're going to go ahead and close the poll at this point, but we can see that on these first pieces, there's more progress than on real engagement that's supported by training and information. So not surprised to hear that. I'm really glad to hear that at least half of folks are already involved at the table with their district. So we're finishing up with some advocacy tips that we have. You want to push your district, and again, these are from a lot of the guiding questions of the LCAP, but push your district to conduct a needs assessment to understand the thinking behind last year's LCAP and to direct the update conversation. So, for example, how are your English learners doing in science and in reading? And is that what drove the goals that exist for last year? What was the thinking and the need behind those goals and the update conversation? We want to include baseline data to inform metrics and goals. That was something the LAO's report highlighted and you should be pushing for at the district level. You want to correct any deficiencies in regard to the state priorities. So if you think back to the OUSD example, there were several deficiencies. They didn't have actions and services. They did not have measurable outcomes. And those would be deficiencies in regard to the state priority of basic necessities for education. You want to include base grant funds in the LCAP. This is a big glaring omission in many, many districts. Including student subgroups in metrics and goals. We saw lots of LCAPs just saying, we're meeting everyone's needs everywhere, and that's not what the LCAP is supposed to report. So Liz already covered a lot of these deadlines, so we'll just be really brief. This is not a suggested timeline. These are hard and fast deadlines. So by June, a district needs to hold their public hearing to consider the final LCAP. And by July 1, they need to adopt the LCAP and the budget at the same meeting. And then they need to publish it on your website and submit it to the County Office of Education for approval by October 8th. Although in reality, because of budget deadlines, they'll be approving those in August. As we've mentioned, we are going to have another webinar about how to properly calculate supplemental and concentration funds and recommendations for collaborating with county offices of education in this new accountability structure. Look in your email for that invite. And then Liz, I'd like to turn it over to you to talk about the evaluation rubrics. You mentioned those earlier as kind of the new way that county offices will be evaluating district LCAP.
Right. LCFF included a new law, included a statute that said, okay, now that we're changing the way we distribute money, the way we're going to hold districts accountable for using that money is through an evaluation rubric. The LCAP is simply the plan for how they're going to use the money, which is one reason why we want the plan to have all the state money. But the evaluation rubrics are supposed to be the tool to help districts identify where they need to improve, and then to help counties and then the state ultimately identify which districts need help for improvement. According to the law, the evaluation rubrics are supposed to be developed by the State Board of Ed. So in the same way the State Board made regulations on spending and developing the template, the State Board staff and their consultant, West Ed, are now going through the process of creating what's called the evaluation rubrics. Some of you have seen notices that we've shared with you that the State Board is having regional input sessions. Essentially, these evaluation rubrics will be how the districts form their new report cards. And the rubrics are supposed to be developed this fall. The three big things that we're concerned about that we're already starting to see is that in the development process, it seems like the state board is really trying to pull back from how it wants to hold districts accountable. So it'll be really important that the state board sets standards for all districts on performance in the priorities and for improvement. In other words, how much do we expect to see districts improve over time? So I hope that if you are able to get to a regional input session, so today there's one in Hayward, tomorrow there's one in Fresno, there's one in San Diego next week. I hope that if you can get there, that you will ask some of these tough questions or insist that the state board set standards for performance in the priorities and for improvement. Now, another challenge that we're hearing is that the state board is wanting to set rubrics that only evaluate the LCAPs, and that's not what this is about. I mean, you could put together a bad LCAP so that you could, meet what it sets. Really what we want to make sure is that the rubrics evaluate how the district performs in the 8 state priorities. That's why it's important to keep those 8 priorities. Simply evaluating the LCAP will not hold districts accountable to the things that you care about. Another priority is whether or not the state board or the legislature is going to pull back from requiring districts to address all the 8 state priorities. Now, if you look at those 8 state priorities closely, those are things that we fought hard for. So, for example, we got in for the first time a priority around parental engagement. For the first time, a priority around school climate and student engagement. These are things that we know our communities really care about and want to consider in holding schools accountable besides just standardized test scores. So it would be harmful if the legislature or the state board backed away from these 8 state priorities.
Thanks, Liz. So you have our contact information through the webinar. Here's also our contact information. We are deeply committed to providing technical assistance and support to any district that wants our support and assistance. And by district, I mean community working in a district. So please be in touch with us if you have any questions about anything we shared today, or if we can be of any assistance to you as you do advocacy with your district. I don't know if, Liz, you have any final thoughts, but right after this webinar ends, I just wanted to say that there will be an evaluation that shows up in your on your browser, and that's going to be really important for us to hear from you what made sense, what didn't make sense. There's a couple rate 1 to 5 questions, and then hopefully it'll also pop up that there's a window for you to share any general feedback, which is really important to us as we try and make these presentations better and plan for the next one. Liz, Angelica, any final thoughts?
This is Liz. Yeah, when the evaluation asks you to provide comments, it would also be helpful to know if there's any particular topic that you'd like to learn more about. And in terms of our assistance or technical assistance with you, we're also available to help you as you plan to educate and organize your base.
Yeah, if you'd like us to reach out to you, just go ahead and write that in the note, and we'd be happy to follow up. Angelica, anything else?
Nothing for me.
Well, we really hope that we met the objectives that you thought you were getting into today's webinar. Hope that you kind of understand some of the wins of the template and the regulations, and you feel like you're a little more familiarized with the template such that you can use it really as an organizing tool and ensure that it is a mechanism to improve outcomes and conditions of learning for kids in your community. And we are available for any assistance. Thank you folks so much for your time. And let's go ahead and I'll go ahead and close the webinar. This is going to be what the evaluation looks like. So thanks so much, everyone, for your participation today. And we'll be in touch about a next webinar. Oh, Angelica asked if anyone has any questions. We'd be happy to take any questions at this time, of course. And otherwise, the webinar is over and you can sign off. Thanks, everyone.
Was somebody trying to speak? I think I've unmuted everybody if you want to.
Hopefully folks will just let us know if any questions either in their evaluation. So let's go ahead and sign off.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everyone.